Okay, good afternoon, and thank you for joining this webinar exploring how brands can acquire new customers, reactivate dormant ones, and identify which tribes their customers belong to. I'm David Teich, Senior Editor of Custom at DIGIDAY Media. Before we get started, I just want to give you a few details on the structure of today's session. Over the course of this webinar, we'll be hearing from two experts as they discuss techniques and best practices for recognizing and nurturing high-value customers. Our panelists today are Sai Coppola, CMO at SheerID, and Andrew Wynn, Head of Product at Zappos. Following this discussion, we'll have some time for a Q&A, so take advantage of that. You don't have to wait until the session to submit your questions. You can add them at any point during the session through the questions tab on the GoToWebinar platform. If you have a specific panelist in mind whom you'd like to direct your question to, feel free to specify, and we'll get to as many questions as possible after the discussion. Everyone registered will also get a recording of this webinar in their inbox tomorrow, should you miss anything or want to revisit any part of this conversation. Okay, so let's do some introductions. Sai Coppola is the CMO at SheerID. Prior to SheerID, Sai led a variety of marketing and product teams at global software companies like Google and SAP, as well as startups like Proximity, which was acquired by Apple, and Apigee, which was acquired by Google. Sai is an electrical engineer by training with an MBA in marketing from Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University. Andrew Wynn is a customer-obsessed product leader at Zappos who delivers wow to customers with personalization and mobile experiences. He has helped ship well-rated, award-winning apps at Zappos, Capital One, and AOL. He is a former software engineer turned product manager who empowers teams with decision-making and roadmap influence. Great to have you both, and with that, we'll get started. Sai, take it away.
Thank you, David. In my role at SheerID, I've been fortunate to work with innovative marketers from brands like Zappos and YouTube and North Face on customer acquisition and loyalty programs. So I'm really excited to have Andrew here from Zappos to talk to us about, we can chat with them around, how they think about personalization, how they engage their customers, their high-value customers. Before we jump into that, I would like to take a couple of minutes to talk to you about some of the trends we're seeing in the marketplace, as well as share some results from a recent Forrester survey of marketers around personalization. So let me just share my slides here. 1 second. So, the first, foremost, given the crisis we are in today, it's apart from the typical thousands of ads a consumer sees a day, we are struggling to get the consumer's attention, right? And not only those, they're also dealing with things like just staying safe, keeping their jobs, and nowadays homeschooling their kids. So getting consumer attention is a challenge. The second part of it is, given the crisis, there's been a disruption in the channel for many of the brands, especially if you're really relying in offline channels. So whether stores are closed or several retailers have gone bankrupt. So we're seeing more and more investment, accelerated investment in e-commerce. The third piece of it is, there's a knee-jerk reaction to do mass discounting to move merchandise, but premium brand managers understand that just dilutes your brand as well as sets customer expectations that might be difficult to change once the crisis is over. The last but not the least, we did a recent consumer survey where 89% of them said they expect brands to support the frontline workers or affected populations in this crisis. What really surprised me was consumers trust their beloved brands more than other institutions like the government to do the right thing. So given that context, it's not surprising that we're seeing increasingly leading brands tying their acquisition and loyalty programs with their corporate social responsibility initiatives too. Now, in terms of the Forrester survey, where they surveyed, I think about 200 or 300 consumer marketers, it is not a surprise that to create an emotional connection, you need to focus on personalization, and personalization still is a top priority for most marketers. Increasingly, there's some challenges around data. With the advent of some of the privacy regulations like CALOPA, as well as some technology changes like browser cookie elimination, we as brands cannot rely on third-party data alone. We are seeing brands focus on getting first-party data directly from consumers. What we are seeing is essentially a value exchange increasingly between consumers and the brand, where the consumers willingly give information about themselves in exchange for an offer that they're excited about. And one of the things we're also seeing is most marketers believe that marketing based on identity attributes like a life stage or affiliation can be very effective. Therefore, we're seeing more and more of them marketing to consumer tribes than just based on demographics. Therefore, it's not a surprise we are seeing, more and more leading brands using a new personalization approach called identity marketing. Identity marketing enables brands to create a gated, personalized offer to specific consumer tribes. Consumer tribe, think of it as a tightly knit communities where members share a common identity, like teachers or nurses or first responders or military. These communities are tight knit, and they are motivated to share offers that resonate with them emotionally. And what we are seeing is it creates an automatic word of mouth effect for brands. With that, let me have Andrew here. Welcome, Andrew. Let me stop my screen share here. Starting with, from Zappos perspective, how did you guys go about figuring out what are the most relevant consumer tribes for your brand?
Sure, Sai, great question. And first of all, great to be with you. It's been some time. It's wonderful to see your face and hear your voice. So great question. I think there's a few approaches, and I'll talk about it from the lens of an existing brand. I think it's really important for an existing brand, established brand like ourselves. We've been around the block. We just hit 21. So something for a brand with that maturity, you should have a really good knowledge base on customers who appreciate you and the customers that you appreciate back. So it's really important for you to understand what are the things your customers appreciate. Customer tribes would appreciate those things. So you kind of reverse engineer what's valuable from your customer base, because they tell you so in so many ways, either explicitly through surveys, through feedback, or through their behavior. Are they purchasing? Are they how's the retention? Are they coming back every week, every month, every quarter, semi-annually? What does that look like? And from that, you can understand, okay, I see what the high value actions are. I see what they say in the surveys and what they really appreciate. We understand through things like NPS surveys how well we're doing from a loyalty mark. So with that, we can generate some hypotheses on which consumer tribes map back to the high value actions, or really our unique value props, the things that we do really well. Which consumer tribes appreciate that, and what can we do for them in a very genuine, authentic way? For example, students and teachers, we do something called Closets for Good, where we'll team up with it was a local, started off locally in Nevada, and then we bridged out across the nation to team up, understand the needs of the faculty and the students, most importantly. And we identify and stock up a closet full of these needs, whether it's shoes, clothes, snacks, materials for education. So we're doing it in such a way that maps back into the things that we care about as employees, as a brand, as a company, as a culture, really.
In terms of, you brought up a really good point about it has to be authentic. In many ways, what we've seen many of the good brands do is it's not just about an offer. It has to be holistic. You already are doing some things, or you're planning to do something around that particular consumer tribe. like you mentioned about teachers and students, you're already doing a bunch of things, whether it's corporate social responsibilities, other initiatives, and you're marrying that with the exclusive offer to this. So with respect to students and teachers, another thing also is, like what you talked about, how you first determine who your target audience is, and based on that demographics, you can also figure out what consumer tribes makes most sense because there's an overlap, right? In terms of students and teachers, talk to me a little bit about what was the offer and how do you think about what should be the ideal offer for just for that exclusive offer, just for that community?
Great. All right. So the offer itself, you can find that online. You can find our student teacher program, and what you'll find is a 10% after you go through the verification process, thanks to SheerID. It's been a wonderful partnership, by the way. So that I wouldn't necessarily call that in and of itself an ideal offer. The ideal offer comes back to what we can offer any consumer. So going back into the things that we do uniquely well, our value props, for example, you can find it. You go to our homepage, you go to our loyalty program, the Zappos VIP program, and you'll see some call outs, the things that we know customers appreciate, which is the free, fast, expedited shipping, no minimums on it, no membership required, hassle-free returns across 365 days. And I believe we're still the only ones that offer something of that sort. And first and foremost, or rather last but not least, excellent customer service. We pride ourselves on the best customer service out there. At least we're gonna try. We're always gonna try to stay up there. And we have a saying at Zappos, we're a customer service company that happens to sell shoes. So mapping it back into that, the 10% is a minor thank you to say, hey, we appreciate y'all. We understand what you may be going through and your phases of your life. And hopefully that's a token that you might appreciate. But we also think you might appreciate the things that we do well that our other consumers that may not fit the bill, that we know that they appreciate.
One of the interesting things we have, we work with 200 plus brands, and one of the interesting things we've seen is you're talking about just 10% discount and also all the other add-on stuff you're giving away, it's not always just a discount. You're right. We have seen some companies focus on, it could be an exclusive access in many cases, or it could be an add-on on top of it, or early access, things like that we've seen brands do. So it's not just purely a pricing thing. It's key is how do you create that emotional connection with that buyer who identified themselves with that community.
Yeah, could not agree more. And just reiterating and re-emphasizing the customer service aspect, we live to create personal emotional connections. Every time we get on a call, that's what we're trying to establish with the customer. We want to make sure that we get to know them well, regardless of whether they buy something from us or not, regardless if they even have an issue with the shopping experience. We will order pizzas. We have a line right now, particularly within this period, we want to let customers know, anybody know, that we're there for you. Give us a call. If you want to talk about anything, we're happy to have that conversation with you. It's called Customer Service for Anything. You can find it on our website as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's one thing Zappos is known for, right? Customer service. In terms of promoting a specific product or offer, what channels have you guys found our channels and tactics most effective in these times?
All right, so customer trust is exceptionally important to us, and we want to be sensitive with everything that's happening around us. It's really challenging times, and organic has certainly been the way to go for us. We want to honor the way the customers want to be reached out to, and organic has just simply been the best established communication channel for us. So we have a variety of callouts on the website, the apps, and email, for example, and we'll do our best to understand our customer, to know which medium, which channel is appropriate to communicate, hopefully to a one-to-one level if we can manage it.
Now, some of your high-value customers, through what the partnership you've done with is you identified them as, hey, they are teachers. How do you use that information to make it more personal and create that emotional connection?
Great, gotcha. So we want to make sure that there's pathways for customers to know what we do. We want to walk the talk, and making sure that we have a pathway towards the Zappos for good, the closets for good concept that I just talked about. It's out there. There's a place to the customer could discover a path towards that content. So we want to make sure that they do stumble there. We don't wear ourselves on our sleeves that much. We don't throw it right up in front, but we hope that through that journey, as they get to know us, as they start dating us, start browsing the site, seeing the selection and whatnot, hopefully as they go through the purchase process and they take the time to know us, they'll find things like that. It's like, oh, it's not just the discount, but here's what they did for students and teachers. So that's really the approach. I think we can do some things to kind of optimize that versus pure discovery. But again, we want to go back to customer trust. We're not in it just for the sale. We're in it for that personal emotional connection, one-to-one with that teacher, student, and every customer.
Yeah. And how do you measure success of these kind of programs where you're creating specific programs and offers for specific consumer tribes?
Great. So good cohort analysis, I think that's just best practice for anybody, regardless whether you're doing consumer tribes, whether you're doing segments, however you go about it, it's important to do cohort retention analysis. So this is part of how we measure success. Again, we're not just in it for the initial sale. We want to make sure that we're in a good position to bring customers back, that we have a worthwhile experience, that they're going to want to shop with us time and time and again. So we'll do health checks, report cards, if you would, on ourselves, not the customer, on ourselves, to say, hey, this customer came in through this campaign, this channel, etc. And did they come back 7 days from now, 15 days, 30, 60, 90? Was it just browsing, or did they actually make a purchase? This way, it helps us understand, well, where do we go? What customer appreciates what? Can we define personas, micro segments? Can we learn more about this customer to elevate the experience and ultimately deliver more personal emotional connections?
Yeah. One of the advantages of like identity marketing, it gives the marketer the flexibility now to create a specific offer or experience to a targeted group of people without worrying about cannibalizing that with the rest of their rest of the market. So that's why companies like you, we partner with you in terms of providing instant verification within the consumer experience. Talk us through your process about thinking through, because whenever you add additional questions, it is considered friction, right? So you're trying to juxtapose, I want to have as little friction as possible. At the same time, I want to fence my offer and capture valuable first-party data. Now, I've seen when the offer is really compelling, the consumer doesn't see the friction, but I want to get your viewpoint on how you guys thought through that process. Hey, I want to do this, but at the same time, I want to minimize friction.
Great. Yeah. So tell you what, we leaned on you guys over at SheerID. You work across many fantastic brands, partners, and there's best practices. Unfortunately, even as a consumer myself, if I were to subjectively measure it, it's not much friction. There's a few form fields that are all reasonable, that doesn't defy trust to me. and everything is really clean. It's a simple process. We could even take a look at the quantitative analysis to tell us who showed up and who completed the form. And the numbers look great. So from the perspective of friction, on the quantitative side, it's wonderful. On the qualitative side, just being in the business and the industry, best practices and whatnot, it's pretty solid. And for what the customer is looking for the consumer tribes that are looking to say, hey, yes, I appreciate that token of gratitude for us. I am willing to go through this simple form, fill it out, and go through the process and ultimately perhaps get to checkout. So from what I've seen, a clean, frictionless experience. Fortunately, out of the box, you guys have done a fantastic job over at SheerID. And then we put our own twist to it. We made sure that it's in the voice of Zappos, that it's on brand with the tone, the colors, etc., to make it feel like, no, we're not just shooting you off to a third-party partner. This is the extended Zappos family. SheerID and Zappos are together, and we're offering this program as a cohesive experience, and we care about you. So that's been our approach. Marrying the two, it reduced friction to me. It reduced a massive amount of friction.
And that's the fascinating part of the more brands we engage with, when you actually look at the data, what's interesting we're realizing is if it is done authentically in terms of messaging in the initiatives you're doing, and the offer is compelling, the consumer is raising their hand and saying, hey, I'm happy to give you this information in exchange for that value, right? And I truly believe going forward, this is how you create brand trust. This is how there's exchange of value between the brand and the consumer, rather than sniffing some of my data off my social media profile or things like that, where you buy. There's so much marketing data available out there, third-party data. Instead of that, this is a much better way of getting data directly from me, the consumer, that is more accurate, builds brand trust, and then also it's in line with all the privacy regulations and stuff that's going to come in the near future anyway. In terms of, so now let's say I am one of the consumers. I came to Zappos. I saw this amazing stuff you're doing for students and teachers. I said, great, let me give you my information so I can get this offer. I get the offer. Now that you have me as a customer, how do you re-engage me? What is your process? And let's say I made a good purchase. What's your process of re-engaging me, getting me back to Zappos, and talk to me a little bit about that.
Sure. So really, we want to accelerate your path towards the shopping journey. We want you to explore Zappos. What we're hoping in, say, the happy path of the user journey, they sign up, they get verified, approved, and we provide a going back into friction-free experience. We say, hey, you don't even have to copy and paste. It'll just automatically, or auto-magically, as I like to say, it will appear in your checkout. Everything will be taken care of for you. All you have to do now is shop. So we try to take away the hurdles and help them get to know us. Go on that first date with us. Go to Zappos.com. Explore the app even, if you would. And we hope the takeaways are, whoa, well, Zappos actually cares about me. They care about the customer experience. There's no pressure here. I see the vast selection of brands. I know that I get free expedited shipping if I join the VIP program. I know that I can have a sense of peace that I can return things within 365 days if things don't work out. So that is the accelerated path that we want the customer to be on after they get their verification and their 10% code. So once that occurs, it's just, hey, do these customers want to come back for a repeat visit or a repeat purchase? So it brings back the cohort analysis where we're trying to understand what is the time between their next visit, the time between their next purchase. Is it in line? How does that look like with other customer segments, the broader customer base? Does it over-index, under-index? Question. I think this is just a really important concept for marketers in general, is that chances are you're always going to, if you go with a hyper or micro segmentation, you will always find within that tribe or that segment a higher performing over indexing segment, at least from what I found. So you want to dissect that, go into that, and see what you can find out. On the quantitative side, what are they doing? Why are they doing that? You probably need a qualitative study, and it's worth the time. It's worth the time to reach out. While you're reaching out, try to build that personal emotional connection.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah, hopefully that helps.
Looking forward from what things have you implemented, let me give you an example, right? We have seen companies like Lowe's, for example, what they've done is they've taken that first party data about me as belonging to, let's say, the military, my branch, my date of birth, and tied it to my loyalty account, their My Lowe's account. So that way now they are now campaigning to me once a month with a special promotion just for, to my consumer travel military members, right? You already have an app. Looking forward, I'm not putting you on a spot. I just want to think through, are you guys thinking about how you're getting all this valuable first party data? How are you trying to marry it with your CRM or whether with your app? So let's say in the case of teacher, hey, you send me something surprising to me on Teacher Appreciation Week, right? Just throwing brainstorming here with you. Have
Sure.
you guys thought of these kind of things?
Yeah. So we do think about ways to elevate that reward or that token appreciation. We have done Veterans Day bonus just the last holiday. So we think about those events, but ultimately, fundamentally, it goes back into what we believe we do well. And so we're really confident that the customer that would appreciate our value props and whatnot, they also appreciate the personalization aspect. So I completely agree with you when you mentioned, hey, implicitly the customer finds it worth their time to provide explicit information. That's great. That's one piece of it. You should always have a balance between explicit and implicit. And I want to go into the implicit side. So we have a fantastic data science team who's worked hard on fantastic personalization algorithms down to a one-to-one level. And that's part of the value that we want them to see too. So over time, as they browse, as they make their purchase, their second purchase, hopefully, they'll see it implicitly come and show up through the experience. And this would be true for all customers. And we want to do things in a way that compounds. We want to do something that's healthy for any customer that decides to shop at Zappos, and marrying the implicit information that these consumer tribes are offering. It helps us set the bar even higher to do personalization even better. So that's how I like to think of it.
Now, in terms of advice to other marketers, if somebody out there likes the idea of, hey, for my brand, for my target audience, these consumer tribes, I'll just pick some, right? Like these teachers and nurses, makes a lot of sense. What advice would you give them on how they should consider rolling out an identity marketing program? Whether it is internal organizational buy-in, or just walk us through, what are the tips and tricks you would provide for somebody new to this, like, hey, that's interesting. Let me think about how my brand can give a compelling gated exclusive offer to a specific consumer tribe, like nurses or teachers.
Sure. All right. Great question. To the marketers out there starting a newer program, something that you'll have to think about is, well, how do you define loyalty? Are you optimizing for retention, acquisition, a combination of the both? How do you want to look at that? The reason why I ask is that more and more, I believe the trend, and honestly, the proper thing to do is look at retention. If you do retention well, your acquisition dollars will be more efficient. And that's what you would want ultimately anyhow. So in order to do that well, I personally believe you have to be keying back in on being authentic and genuine. understand what your brand, your company, your product does uniquely well in the marketplace, and offer that up with the right tone to establish trust. It's like, hey, here's what we do in general. This is what we're good at. This is why it could be good for you. So if you do that in an authentic, genuine way that's easy to consume, easy to understand, you have some great examples that build that consumer confidence that yes, they can trust you. That's going to help you with retention and loyalty, and ultimately make that acquisition dollar a lot more worthwhile, a better ROI on those dollars.
Yeah. Now, you bring up a really valid point. It has to be authentic. Otherwise, it just comes across as lip service. I know in a recent example we've seen is, for example, North Face. I think about very beginning of the COVID crisis, they were already had a whole initiative around supporting COVID response teams. But then they said, hey, we want to do something special for the front line. So they gave a 50% off. It's still valid till the end of the year. 50% off that across that entire merchandise. A very generous offer. And combining what they were already doing with this offer with the right messaging, they are seeing phenomenal success. So it's very important to make sure whatever consumer try to decide, it comes across as authentic as well as the compelling offer. From our part, by the way, Andrew, I think you may know this. What we are doing is during this crisis, we actually giving some of our services away for free, especially if some of the new brands they want to run a program focused on some of the frontline workers like first responders and nurses and doctors. We're running it right now. You guys can, anybody interested can look at our website, sheerid.com / I think heroes, where you can get more information about that. One last thing before we take audience questions. Andrew, you had a long illustrious career in marketing. For marketers who just starting in their career in the first few years, what general advice would you give them from a career perspective?
Oh, wow. Great philosophical question. All right. So the advice that I would provide, hedge your bets. This is just general advice that I give to anybody, particularly the people that I coach. So it's important as you establish best practices, you understand, you formulate a strategy, you formulate your tactics for that strategy, and you hedge it. So what I mean is you want to mitigate the risk. So if you're generating a hypothesis and experiments on, hey, how do I approach a certain customer? Make sure that you have different experiment variations in place, for example, that you try different tones of copy, and then you optimize the scale.
Andrew, sorry to jump in, but we're getting some technical difficulties on you. We're getting some echo on you. Apologies about that. Is there a way to adjust anything on your end? You know what? I'm just going to leap into the Q&A section of this. Apologies to interrupt. Sai, I would start by asking you, and this is an audience question. How do you account for the fact that there is beyond just targeting professions? Is there a way to go deeper?
Sorry, you cut out there. I could only hear some of the question there.
Okay. So, sorry about that. The question was, how do you account that there's attitudinal diversity within professions? Beyond just targeting professions, is there a way to go deeper and target different individuals within those professional groups?
Yeah, so the idea here is not either or, right? So one side of it is, you're trying to first go broad. And what we go when you go broad is, instead of trying to go purely by demographics, you get a much better emotional connection when you tap into how that user consumer identifies themselves. For example, when we did a survey, teachers identify themselves more as first as teachers than as a parent, which is kind of mind-boggling to me. So what we're not suggesting is, hey, this is the only way to do it. There are multiple tools in your personalization toolbox. Like Andrew talked about, one aspect of it is implicit. What are they buying, right? Based on what their buying behavior is, that's one aspect of it. The second part of it is, how do they identify themselves? That's where the professional affiliation falls in. So it's a combination of different techniques you would use to create that emotional connection.
Got it. Very interesting. Another question we have, Andrew. So here's the question we have. Sorry, let me pull this up. How do you handle customers who don't get auto-verified?
Great question. All right, so there's a few flows there. There's the instant path, and there's the instant path is where you'll automatically know within the process itself, the web form, whether you got verified or not. So that one is simple, clean. It's, hey, you didn't verify, please try re-uploading. You might want to consider these documents to upload. And the other path is where, hey, something within the process, we have to have a human involved. There's somebody that's going to be looking over things, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. So we establish some kind of expectation and timeline when we get back to the customer. And this is done purely in partnership with SheerID, our customer service team working with their customer service team, making sure that we have that established partnership in place, making sure that we have FAQs that are easily accessible in place as well. So that's the way that we handle the folks that don't get auto-verified in. And typically the success rates of taking care of something that might have fallen through the process has been quite good. It's been a good experience just through the customer feedback.
Just to add to Andrew, the goal here is verify them while they're on the site or in your app. So in the small percentage of cases where they don't get instantly verified, we have pretty strong SLAs where usually they get verified in a minute or less. So that's kind of how while they're shopping around, they get verified. So that's the goal behind what we do.
Interesting.
Great point, Ty. Yep, the vast majority do get verified instantly, and it's quite smooth.
And Andrew, another question. Zappos is such a large company. What type of committee did you have to put together to get SheerID into place?
Great question. There wasn't much of a large committee. It really started off with myself and finding people within the organization to support it. And that's what's great about Zappos, where our mission is to live and deliver well. And part of that mission, we decided to implement organizational governance like holacracy that allows a vast amount of empowerment and autonomy. So if you're passionate about something like this, you can pick it up and go with it and find some support along the way. So it wasn't a large committee, but it was people that were able to lend their support from engineering, marketing, etc., legal, customer service, and they'd come in and out and provide their time whenever they could. It was a journey, but we got out there, and I'm proud to say that Zappos fosters that kind of environment that allows something like that to happen, starting with an individual.
And if I take a step back and look at some of the other brands, what has helped them move faster? Look, I think there's a phrase like success has many parents or something like that, right? So what we found is, you start one campaign, literally it can be one targeted campaign over a weekend or or a week, and you get the numbers. You'll see the results for yourself, right? So once you have those results, then you can build your case for a larger effort within the company. So that's one approach that's worked well again with many of the bigger brands we work with, there's some innovative marketing. They say, hey, why would we not try this? We've been doing the same thing again and again. Why don't we try something different? And the reality is, the way this whole thing works, there's very little technology lift. Most of it is out of the box, so you can literally put a widget on your site and it pops up a form there. So you can try it for very little investment to see how it works for your specific brand and for that consumer tribe you're interested in, and you get the results in terms of conversion rates and uplift, and you can then basically go from there.
Very interesting. So this next question I would put to both of you. Sai, I'll start with you. What segments do you recommend starting with?
It totally depends on your brand, right? Let me give you two extreme examples. Like in the case of Lowe's, what they found is one of their key audiences tend to be 30s, 40s male resourceful. That aligned very well for them with the military segment, right? Same thing with Bass Pro Shops and things like that. Whereas on the other end, somebody like a Zappos or a Rockies will say, hey, for me, it's women in the 30s and 40s and 50s. Then they'll say, okay, why wouldn't I not offer something for nurses, especially during this pandemic? So you need to figure out for your brand who your core audience is. And for example, for Spotify, it's completely different. They know in the music business, you need to get a customer very early on, because if you don't get them by late 20s, it's extremely difficult to get them later. So they're very much focused on, let's get the Gen Z audience, let's get the students, right? So it's very dependent on the brand. You as a brand need to figure out, okay, what are my target audiences? Therefore, how do they map to the various consumer tribes with the strong affinity within them?
Andrew, I put the same question to you. What segments do you recommend starting with?
Great. All right. So I'm going to key in on some of the points that we mentioned earlier in the chat. It really depends. It depends on who you are as a brand and what offer or what value you can bring to specific customer segments. So I always say, go back to the fundamentals, understand what you do really well, and understand the segments of customers that would really appreciate that. Here's a loose example. So this is my line of thinking, where let's talk about Zappos for a moment. If we have free fast shipping, great return policy and whatnot, there's clearly we see a benefit to that in the e-commerce environment right now. There's whether it's safety concerns or whatnot, but in any environment, and you map back towards a specific segment, what about college students? If they're in a more rural area or a college town, what's the accessibility to a mall like? Are they 20 minutes out, 30 minutes out, 45 minutes out? Can we save them time? Can we add convenience into their lives and their busy full-time student schedules? So we know we can offer something that is that would deliver them some kind of joy and happiness if they shop with us. That's our along the lines of thinking. Can we be there for the biggest moments within their lives? Can we be there for their graduation? Last minute, I was a last minute student. I'm a last minute in general. I'm still trying to fight the habit. And there's many of us out there. I'm sure there's still wonderful segments of great people out there that are last minute and might appreciate, shoot, I gotta get myself ready for that internship. Even if you're interviewing through video cam, it's still a better practice to dress up in a way that represents you well. And maybe we can be there for you. We want to be. If we can be, we'd be honored to be a part of that special moment in your life. So think about the fundamentals again, see how you map back into specific segments and specific moments in their lives where they might need your service or product.
Adding to what Andrew said, moments in life, one of the things we are seeing brands do is, everyone knows about Thanksgiving and Black Friday and things like that, right? A lot of brands have figured out, how do I create mini events throughout the year at that same time does not dilute my brand. So what's happening is once you identify your core segment, then you can say, when you celebrate Teachers Appreciation Week, for example, or Nurses Appreciation Week, and give something special, that's actually not brand dilutive. It actually adds to the brand. So not only you're driving acquisition and also creating the emotional connection with the segment, but you're also improving your brand value. So think through, for your brand, what are the audiences, what times of the year are most appropriate for those segments, and how can you celebrate those moments?
Those were great answers. We have time for one more question. Again, I'll put this to both of you. It's just a broad, overarching, summary question. Is there any other general advice that you would like to give to marketers? Andrew, I'll start with you.
Great, thank you, David. So I'll try to complete the hedge your bets statement. I want to go back into that. So oftentimes what I see when we're executing on an experiment, perhaps there's not enough variations, or perhaps there's not enough flexibility in finding the most optimal approach and scaling out the best path towards success. So how I mean by that, a more colorful example is that we may ask the customer to say, hey, would you review this product? And this helps you get to know the customer a bit better. There's a few ways to go about it. Hey, what's in it for you? Hey, what's in it for others? Hey, what's in it for Zappos, or a hybrid of all that? And sometimes I just see just one variation against whatever the baseline is, or a full out launch. And I feel like that's a huge missed opportunity. So I would suggest hedge your bets, put more shots on goal, and maybe you'll get surprised. Oftentimes I'm surprised. Something that was more effective was, hey, it's not what's in it for you, but it's what's in it for others. You'd be helping the community out. You'd be helping other Zappos customers out. And happy to say that that's what resonates really well with the customer base, and it's really what we appreciate too. So hedge your bets.
From my side, look, I've had the pleasure to work with many innovative marketers across various brands. When I look at people like Andrew and others I worked with, one of the things is the 2 or 3 things that standard for me is this openness to new ways of doing things. And the biggest hurdle in a lot of big brands is, the biggest enemy is the inertia. Hey, this is how we've been doing it, and we continue to do the same thing again and again, right? So what I found, the innovative marketers is like, they have this experimental mindset, like, hey, let's try something new, but let's make sure we have data to show that it actually is working. Or if it's not working, great, how do we quick experiments and rather fail fast, right? So that is what I would urge every marketer out there. Hey, why would you not try something new that makes sense for you? But try small, experiment it, A/B test it, see the results, and then you can create a bigger. Somebody asked a question about what committee you created. Committee comes later. See how you can quickly do an experiment and get the data. That'll automatically then give you a lot more traction in moving your projects and agenda further.
Great, fantastic. Thank you both for your insights. We're going to wrap up there. But Sai and Andrew, thanks again. And I'd like to thank everyone for listening as well. That's where we close, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.